Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Morgan Hunt webinar on mental health and suicide prevention in the workplace. We'll discuss challenging the stigma that still exists around mental health and suicide, strategies for building an inclusive and mentally healthy workplace, and explore potentially the unique challenges of male mental health. So our aim really is to equip you with some tools to support both yourself and those around you. My name is Claire Canary. I'm a director at Morgan Hunt, and I also lead on HR and wellbeing within our organisation. And for those of you who don't know us, Morgan Hunt is a UK-based recruitment business. We have over 150 recruiters in Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham, and London. And our award-winning recruitment teams place talented candidates with organisations across the charity, education, finance, government, housing, property, social care, and technology sectors. I'm really delighted this morning to be joined by Matt Keenan. Matt is the founder and MD of the Anxious Lad company, which he set up to change the conversations around mental health and to support both businesses and individuals. Building on his own lived experience battling with generalized anxiety disorder, Matt has also a key focus on the unique challenges around male mental health. And he helps and supports employers and individuals and leaders to recognize signs of mental health struggles and how to start and open up those conversations and to offer support. Before we start our conversation this morning, just a few points on our structure. Our session will go on till 10:30. So we'll have about 45 minutes for our general chat and then time at the end for your questions. But please, if you have a question for Matt at any point in our conversation, please post it onto the YouTube chat and we will see it and I will try as time allowing to answer as many questions as possible. But now, to kick off our conversation, Matt, welcome. Could you please tell us about yourself and your journey with generalized anxiety disorder?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Claire, thanks a million for inviting me on this morning. I really appreciate it. So I was diagnosed with GAD or generalized anxiety disorder a few years ago. And I guess a little bit of a backstory. I guess I've always been quite anxious. I just never really knew what it was. We kind of get into how it manifests itself a little bit later on, but I kind of had a bit of a breakdown during COVID that led me to seek help. I went to the doctor. The doctor said, look, it's depression. Again, we'll look at that in a bit as we go on. I was put on medication after after a month or so. It wasn't working. I went back and spoke to him, monthly checkups. The meds aren't working. I feel worse, that kind of stuff, which is not unusual. And the doctor just kept increasing the medication every time. So I went from being on a very low dosage of like 37 milligrams up to over 300 milligrams a day of this antidepressant. That in itself then has a whole different range of physical and emotional side effects that were brought with it, which ultimately led me to believe that the only way to stop this was to end my own life. So plans were put in place for me to leave the house one day, basically with the intent of never coming home, really. My suicide was planned. Everything was taken care of from my perspective. Luckily, I didn't go through with it. I did come home. I then got myself into therapy. And it was only during the course of the therapy then, speaking with my psychotherapist, I think we were 7-8 months in total in therapy. It was only during the course of that we realized actually I don't have and never had depression. I have severe anxiety or GAD. So what was happening was it was manifesting itself in aggression, withdrawal, all of these other things, and you put it down to I'm just stressed or I'm tired or I didn't sleep and where we were now.
Well, you were talking about that actually never had depression. It was severe anxiety,
Yeah, yeah,
generalized.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as I said, look, it was the therapist who kind of realized that. And once we kind of came to that realization, it was like a light bulb went off, you know. I started working very quickly then, as safely as I could, to come off the medication, because they weren't serving me well at all. And then it was a case then of trying to work with the therapist and different people afterwards, and trying to understand what my anxiety looks like, how it manifests, because it's different for everybody. And then how I can just start to live, better again, and understanding everything. So it off the back of that, then I think, kind of going out into the world and looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, I'm a bloke of an age, I'm married, I've got kids, I've a mortgage, I've a job, I've got all of the stuff going on. Um, where was the support? Why didn't I see it coming? Why wasn't I aware of it? All of these questions started running around in my head. And during that time, I was listening to a lot of different mental health podcasts. Um, and a lot of them were great. Now, don't get me wrong, but what I found, what the market, let's say, was lacking, was a real open, honest conversation between two blokes about what men's mental health actually looks like, and how it manifests in different ways, and why we don't talk about it, I think, was the biggest question that was popping up in my mind. So I decided to create one. So I created the Anxious Lad podcast, and that was the beginning of the journey. And it was really to get rid of the fluff, get rid of all of the nonsense, and as I said, just have two blokes sitting down, open and honest conversation about mental health. What challenges we face as men, what stigmas we face as men, and all of that kind of stuff. So that was going really, really well. I was successful to a degree in that, in that it's now streamed in 44 different countries. It was in the top 5% most video played podcasts on Spotify, and in the top 10 most shared globally on Spotify in 2023. So that was going really well. So there was a few different, I guess, rabbit holes I fell down during all of that kind of stuff. And that kind of led me then to create the Anxious Lad Mental Health Company. So again, kind of going back into the market, speaking to people in the field, in the corporate world, and in the private sector and stuff. I'm a big believer in nothing changes if nothing changes, Claire, right?
Yeah.
And what was really niggling at me, I think, was if we have companies, charities, well-being, online groups, online stuff, fundraisers, all of this kind of stuff, looking at mental health and suicide prevention, why are the numbers not coming down?
Yeah.
Why are they staying the same? Something's missing if the numbers are rising. And certainly in Ireland anyway. I know, look, we see over 500 suicides a year. They're recorded suicides now. Sorry, there is a
Yes.
difference.
Yeah.
The true number is actually higher than that,
Yeah.
because that comes down to a coroner, but that's a completely different story altogether. But then we see over 15,000 admissions to A&E every year for self-harm. Now, a
Yeah.
lot of that would be suicide attempts then as well.
Yes.
So in my mind, I'm looking at going, okay, well, what's not working? What are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
Right. And I believe that we're just not having the right conversation within companies, within the corporate world, within our day-to-day lives. Basically, we're kind of, to a certain degree, I believe, in sugarcoating the conversation, because we
Yeah.
don't want to have that raw, honest, open, truthful conversation about it. So let's just skim across the top of it, So
Yeah.
with the workshops that I deliver, that's the angle I kind of take with it, right? I deal with adults every day. I'm not dealing with children. So let's
Yeah.
have a grown-up adult conversation about mental health, suicide, and the stigmas that's related to all of it. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, makes sense. And like to because I think there is a little bit of reticence, particularly in a professional environment, where people are a bit like, oh, can I go there? Is it okay? It's still work, and how do
yeah,
I navigate it? So what advice would you give, to an employer or a leader or a colleague, just to open up that conversation. They think somebody's struggling. They can see some signs. And I mean, I think most people will either personally or in their family or their close relationships have seen somebody struggle at a point.
Yeah.
And they think, you know what, I need to do something here. How do you start to open that conversation, particularly in a work environment?
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing, Claire, right? It's look, keep it simple, right? It doesn't have to be this big convoluted thought process going into it, right? If you're concerned about somebody's well-being, what happens a lot of the time is that people go into it thinking, I don't know how to fix it, so I'm going to stay away from it because I'm not a therapist or I'm not a trained professional and this, that, and the other. You don't need to be, right? You're not there to try and fix it. You're there to try and identify if there is a problem and how do we navigate that then together, right? So ask the question. It's very simple. In all of the suicide training that I do and any of the suicide training that you can avail of, the only question you should ask is, are you considering suicide? Nothing else. That's the only question you ask, right? Don't sugarcoat it. Don't say, are you thinking of doing something stupid? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Because the answers to those questions will always be no, because in the mind of somebody who's considering suicide, what they're thinking of doing is not stupid, right?
Yeah.
So they fully believe that what they're thinking of doing or considering doing is the right thing to do for everybody around them, right? So, and then the funny thing is when you look at it afterwards, they'll think, okay, well, I'm sorry for thinking that way, right? But the only question to ask is, look, are you considering suicide? I'm worried about you. I've seen a change. Is everything okay? You may get an answer straight away. You may need to push on that a little bit more. You may need to ask that question 2 or 3 times, right? But by asking that direct question, are you considering suicide? The shock of that will ultimately lead the person to say either a definite yes or a definite no, but you will get a truthful answer if you ask that question. You ask anything else, you're not going to get a truth. You're going to beat it. It's just going to get beaten around the bush, basically. So it has to be open and honest. But I think the biggest thing as well, Claire, what we have to do is we have to change the narrative, right? We have to stop being afraid of having that conversation. Like I said, you're not there. If you consider yourself in that position where you see a colleague and you're like, look, I don't know how to have this conversation. I don't know how to help them. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist, whatever the case is. You don't need to be. You're not there to fix it. Ask the question and then shut up. Let them talk. It's that simple. Just let them know that somebody's there to support them. And then together you can kind of navigate that thing. You're not there to give advice. You're not there to tell them what to do. You're not there to try and, fix their world. You're there just to open up and say, listen, I'm here. I can help. What can we do to make it better? What can we do to support you? I think from speaking to a lot of my clients, and I'm going to, please forgive me, I know you work in HR, and I know a lot of the people who are probably going to be watching this are from the HR world. I'm not having a go. What we think is the right thing to do generally isn't, right? So a lot of the clients I've spoken to who have opened up about their mental health and work feel that they've then been pushed aside because of that, right? You might think that if I open up about my struggles, my anxiety, depression, whatever the case is, okay, well, you need time off work, so go and take 2 or 3 weeks off. That could be the worst thing you could do for that person. Right? Don't assume that this person needs time off, because it might be the lack of human contact outside of the office that's making them feel that way. And you've just plunged them into involuntary time off, into isolation, basically. So the best thing you can ask is, how can we support you? What do you need from us as a business to help? That might be just, let me navigate it. I'm going to count. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. You know what? Maybe a day a week. Maybe I could come down to part-time, or I could come down to half days. Maybe a more kind of remote work or that kind of thing, right? But don't assume you know that taking time off is going to help that person, or giving them forced time out. take 3 weeks, come back to us refreshed, you'll be fine. 9 times out of 10, anyone that's going through a mental health crisis, it's going to take more than a couple of weeks to fix it, you know? So
no, I agree with you, Matt. And like, yeah, thinking that that's going to, if anything, you know, from personal experience, when you're going through a difficult time, actually having something else to preoccupy your mind with, work is a great, can be, not for everybody, I get that.
For sure.
But it is for a lot of people. And I think, denying that then could be, as you say, the worst thing you do. So yeah, that's good shout. And how do you then, you know, because I've had this experience just with colleagues or friends or whatever, that you think there's something wrong, but they're not responding. They're kind of not wanting to even go there, and you're not getting anywhere with that conversation, but you're still thinking, you know what, I'm concerned. So again, in a professional environment, worrying about not wanting to, you know, keep pushing it, but what advice would you give for people you know, if they have that concern, but they're being kept at bay by the individual because they're just not opening up?
Yeah. So, and that's a really good question, right? So, you know, again, from my experience and from, you know, the talks I have with companies and with individuals, there's a couple of different factors at play then with that. Again, there's the stigma associated to it. So if it's in a workplace environment, there is an absolute fear that if I open up, then I'm going to be looked at differently. I'm going to get passed up for promotion. It's going to go on my record. People are not going to think of me differently. They're going to think I can't do my job. So all of those stigmas come into play. As a business, what you have to do is break that stigma completely, right? And that doesn't just mean doing wellness or well-being courses, right? They're good, don't get me wrong, but they don't scratch the surface. You have to change the absolute environment of the company. You have to make it known that it is okay for you to open up about your mental health struggles, because we all will go through them, Claire. At some point in our lives, every single one of us will go through some sort of crisis, right? And whether that be, you know, the loss of a loved one, it might be, I don't know, you're coming off the back of a redundancy and you're going into a new role, but that's still hitting you. That's still playing, you know, it's still niggling in your mind. So we have to get it to a place where you can feel as comfortable ringing your boss or your team lead or your manager at 9 o'clock in the morning and saying, listen, I'm not having a good day mentally today. I need a day. In the same way that you would ring up and say, listen, I've been up vomiting all night and I can't make it into work today. The problem is we're not there yet. Right. No. And we're not there yet because of those stigmas that still exist within the professional world. Right. So that's one side of it. That could be a reason why somebody won't open up or won't say anything. It could be just a fear factor as well, Claire. It could be that they don't trust the person. You know, look, I work with you, but you're not at a place where I'm going to open up. In which case, you know, you might have to ask that question 2 or 3 times to really build that trust and let them know. You don't want to divulge too much information, but you could start by saying, listen, you know, I can see you're struggling a bit. I've noticed A, B, and C. I remember a time when I was, and you offer a little bit of your own story, maybe. That kind of breaks down those walls a little bit and starts to build trust. A really interesting thing, though, for the men listening, or for anyone who works more so with men, if it is a male colleague or somebody, a male in your life, go for a walk, right? Men don't like sitting face to face, having that eye-to-eye contact conversation. What we prefer to do is walk shoulder to shoulder. Because I know I'm not looking directly at you. If you have a teenage son or a husband or a work colleague, go for a drive, because then you're sitting side by side, shoulder to shoulder. You're not looking directly into their eyes. Go for a walk around the campus, around the building, whatever it is you have. You will find that the conversation flows a lot more and men will open up a lot more in that situation, rather than you just sitting down across the table going, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Do you know what I mean?
I know completely. You're almost interrogating. And actually, that's a great shout, because if people get emotional, it's so much easier for them because they know you can't really see them. And that makes complete sense. And one of the things, I mean, you mentioned, you know, we're not there yet and people aren't talking about stuff, and I'm certainly seeing it and talking to our clients every day. I think it's something like over 3 million people increase in working age individuals kind of self-reporting. And this is the UK. I think what I know about Ireland, similar across Europe, same. Reporting mental health conditions or long-term mental health conditions. And the highest rise was among that kind of younger generation, 16 to 34. So I think that's a good thing, because obviously from a generational perspective, hopefully those individuals are kind of having conversations with their bosses that probably you or I maybe never did, because we were just like, you don't do that. You just don't say it. But they're becoming more prevalent, more visible. So, what's your advice to managers dealing with that? Because maybe the manager is of maybe a different work generation, and that isn't what they would have maybe done. They wouldn't have called in and said, you know what, I need this day, as you say, for mental health perspective, rather than I'm not, sick with a stomach bug, but I'm not feeling great. So what do you say to managers in that situation?
Yeah, again, look, I think a big part of this comes down to education, right? In how to have that conversation. Like I said, you don't need to be the therapist. You don't need to be the one to fix the problem. That's all you're there to do is show support, and show that the company is here to help in any way we can, right? If I broke my leg tomorrow, the company would have absolutely no problem in me working from home for the next however long it takes for me to be well again, right? So that has to be in place in the exact same way. And I know, look, and I know a lot of people and a lot of businesses are kind of on that wavelength, but the stigma still exists within it, that I believe in my head that the company is not going to listen to me. I'm going to get passed over. It's going to go on my record. So we have this line of thinking where, like, I just better not say anything, right? What we need to do is like I said earlier, is change the dynamics of the company completely to show that, we do care, right? We will wrap our arms around you and we will help in any way that we can. That comes down to education. It comes down to different types of workshops. It comes down to, like, the workshops that I deliver. They're not designed to make anyone a counselor or make anyone a professional in that regard. It's to look at your own personal biases when somebody is having that conversation, right? Look at what we say in and around the office, right? The stigma. So you've got two types of stigma when we look at mental health, right? You've got self-stigma and social stigma. So the social stigma might be, for argument's sake, if you see 4 or 5 pens on a desk and you automatically go over to when you tidy them up and you say, oh, my OCD can't cope with that. That's got nothing to do with OCD. That's just you wanting something neat and tidy, right? But by you saying that, you don't know if anybody around the room has OCD, and you're just kind of playing into that jokingly thing about it. That person is going to say, well, I'm not opening up about it because you clearly don't understand what it is, so I'm never going to say anything, right? You might say, I'm really stressed this week. It's the end of the quarter. I'm behind my target. And somebody says, well, what have you got to be stressed about, right? It's all of these little conversations. You shouldn't be stressed. You shouldn't be anxious. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I will worry about it because it's important to me and it's making me anxious and it's making me stressed. All of these little kind of conversations that happen from our own personal biases and our own, view of the world can make somebody feel like I can't open up in work. Because every time I say I'm stressed, it gets shut down. Every time I say I'm anxious, it gets shut down. So we need to kind of say, okay, well, what is it you're stressed about? Right? What is it about the target you're stressed? What is it about the deadline that's stressing you out? That's where the manager needs to step in and say, look, irrespective of what happens, right? A target is a target. And from being in the sales world for years, targets never go down. They only ever go up.
No, they only go up. Yeah.
And you're only as good as your last month, right? So we need to get to a place of understanding where the manager will say, look, I support you irrespective of what happens. You don't hit your target this month. It's not the end of the world. We'll regroup. We look at what went wrong in the previous month and we go again, right? It needs to get like that. We need to stop putting people down based on what we believe is stressful for us, because what might stress me out won't touch the sides for you, right? So everyone has their own little, I do a a thing on this in the workshops that I do, where I ask people to think of the color green, and then halfway through the workshop, I put 50 shades of green on the wall and ask them, what color green did you think about? And I'll get 30 different responses, right? It could be, it could be forest, it could be this, it could be that. All I said was green, but everyone else's mind went to different shades of it. So it's the same with anxiety, with stress, with worry. We all have a different flavor, a different shade of it.
Yeah.
But by using our own experiences to compare it to other people, that's where we're losing out on, and that's where we're still seeing that stigma associated across the board.
Yeah, we're bringing our what we are
Yeah.
and imposing it on other people. So yeah. So anything else that you've seen in action from employers who've, everyone's got limited resources on things, don't they, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things they want to support their workforce with. But anything else that you've seen in action in an organization that, you know what, that's really good. That's good. That's opening it up. It's making it a kind of healthy, from a mental health perspective, workplace, in terms of tips that you could give for other organizations.
Yeah, I think, look, just be honest is the only way. Like this, this isn't rocket science, right? The problem we have, and I say it at the moment, and it kind of goes across the board. Like I deliver well-being and wellness courses as well, right? And I do them in my community and that kind of stuff. And what's really interesting is that, the online world will convince you that, well-being and wellness is this massive, convoluted, complicated thing that you need to pay thousands and thousands for to get a grip of understanding. It's not. It's very simple, right? We need to stop, I guess, over exaggerating everything and rip it right back to pure, simple basics, right? Open conversations, have, those water cooler conversations with your colleagues, show inclusiveness, show that, it doesn't matter what the problem is, we're here to help, right? Again, like if I hurt my back playing football or whatever at the weekend, I should be able to walk into work and say, my back's killing me. I did A, B, and C. I should also be able to walk into work and say, you know what, I had a freak out mental breakdown over the weekend because of A, B, and C. And those conversations need to become the norm, because it's only when we start to do that those numbers will come down. This is what we're not doing at the moment. Like I said to you earlier, Claire, if we have well-being courses and mindfulness stuff that, companies are doing, if we have, other different, I don't know, avenues that they're going around, and they kind of become corporate box ticking exercises, right?
Yeah.
So you've got your D&I committees, you've got your ESG committees, you've got all of this stuff set up. One of the biggest pushbacks I get when I speak to companies about delivering a mental health, one of my mental health workshops, is that, oh no, we have HSE guys coming in to do a well-being course. That's brilliant. That's great. We should be doing well-being anyway, and mindfulness should be part of our daily lives anyway. That doesn't scratch the surface yet, right? That doesn't really support the guys. It doesn't really open up the conversation of what we need to be talking about seriously. So what I see working well in companies are companies that do exactly that. It's companies that will say to somebody, I worked in a company in London a few years ago, and they used to do a thing once a month. We had an afternoon off. You can take it whenever you want. There's an afternoon, go and do it. And there was no, so long as it didn't overlap with somebody else's afternoon off, go and take it, right? A mental health day, right? You can incorporate into work. Just say, look, there's one day outside of your allotted holiday allowance. There's one day a month where you can just go and do what you need to do, right? Have a mental health day. What that does for somebody who, certainly if they're married, if they've got kids who are normally in school or whatever, gives them a day for themselves to just regroup and just do what it is. Go to the cinema, go for a walk, sit at home in your PJs and stick a movie on, right? It doesn't, like, little things like the little incentives like this can go a massive, massive way, but always bringing it back to why we're doing it. Right. We're not doing it to reward you for your good work. We're doing this to make sure that your mental health is in a good place, basically. So always bringing the mental health element back to it. So you can start to do little incentives like that. I think we really need to start not being afraid of that difficult conversation, right? when you think about our working lives, we spend so much time with the people we work with, probably even more so than our families in some cases,
Yeah,
depending on how
do.
many
Yeah,
hours we do, right? So all of these people need to be aware of how to spot the signs of suicide. They need to be, to a certain degree, be able to have that initial conversation with them and not be afraid to have that conversation. And I think that's where a lot of where we're missing, certainly from a corporate world perspective,
yeah,
is that companies are afraid to have that conversation because we don't want to acknowledge it. Because if we
yeah,
acknowledge it, it's going to come and it's going to happen to us. It's going to happen to you whether you acknowledge it or not, right?
yeah,
What you want to do is prepare your staff and get them um, in a place where they feel confident in asking that tough question: are you considering suicide?
yeah.
That only happens if you bring somebody in to deliver that workshop. So I
Mhm.
think that's a couple of those things is what we could.
Great, Matt. And one of the things I've seen actually is leaders being vulnerable and sharing their own experiences,
Yeah,
and particularly male leaders actually opening up and saying, you know, I've had times, or this time of the year, whatever it is, that can be really, really, really helpful, because it just means,
absolutely.
okay, that's all right. We can all do that. That kind of leads me on to the kind of unique challenges around male mental health. And I know you've personally you do a
Yeah,
lot of work in this area. You know, see suicide leading cause of death for men under 50, which is crazy. And 75% of all suicides, definitely in the UK, are men. You know, dying by suicide. So, you know, there's clearly, as you've already mentioned, an issue there. So, why do men seem to still suffer in silence in 2025 when you think, you know, as you say, there's loads of stuff out there, everyone's talking about wellness, and
yeah,
people are starting to be a little bit more open about mental health, but it's not moving that dial really.
yeah. Again, great question. And again, I guess the nuances around it are vast as well. Look, we've got this. I think from a male perspective, yeah, the suicide rate is higher, right? It's from a global perspective, it's 78% of global suicide are men, right? The interesting fact is actually that women will attempt suicide more than men, right?
Yeah.
Men tend to be a lot more violent with it in their means, and
Mm,
therefore more successful, right?
yeah.
Um, but it does come back down to social stigmas. It does come down to what is it to be a man? I don't open up and I talk, and there is a lot of stuff going on now at the moment, certainly online. In you probably see a lot of it talking about now the manosphere, right?
Yes.
So those online communities that were originally set up, let's say to support men in their struggles, right? But now they've kind of been infiltrated by this misogynistic view where we're blaming women and everything else on the rest of the world, right? What
Mm,
that does is it distorts our view of the world and makes us feel, are we alone? Are we a burden? Nobody likes us, and it gives us this, as I said, this distorted view of everything around us. The other side to it is we're not brought up, right, from a male perspective, and I am generalizing here, by the way, right? Um, we're not brought up in a world where it's okay for men to talk, right? Certainly
mhm,
our friends with our peers, right? I know from speaking to the women in my life, you know, they grow up even during school by having those conversations. We don't know how to do it. It's not something that's instilled in us from a young age, certainly with our friend groups and even, you know, the older generation men for their parents and the men around them. So what happens is if I try to open up to my mates, to the lads, you know, maybe we're sat having a beer or whatever the case is, and I try to open up, the bloke on the other side of it can feel really uncomfortable. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to say here. So that conversation can be shot down very quickly, right? A joke can be made, or listen, you be grand, don't be worrying about it. What's happening is the other person is not necessarily trying to brush it aside. They're just really uncomfortable with that conversation, right? That in itself then turns back to the person who's trying to open up, thinking there's no point in me saying that because nobody bloody listens anyway, right? So again, this is where the education element of it comes in, certainly from a team leader, management perspective, and an overall colleague perspective, is we need to start teaching men how to just listen, right? Just listen. That's all. I know, I know my wife used to give out to me over this one. We also feel as men that we should fix everything, right? And you're nodding your head because I know your husband has done it in the
Yeah,
past. So you come home from work and you've had a bad day and you just want to open up and talk about it. And he says, you know what you should do? You should do this, or you should do that. And I was like, I don't want you to fix it. Just shut up and listen. So that's
yeah,
the advice I put out to any other man out there, right?
yeah,
Who has a friend, who, has a colleague, has somebody who works underneath them, has somebody on their team who tries to open up. Stop trying to fix it. Just shut up and listen.
yeah,
Because I said, you're not there to fix it. You're not there to be the person who gets them through counseling, or
no,
counsels them, or does the therapy with them. You're there just to listen. That's it.
yeah,
So all you can do, you've 2 ears, use them, right? Shut your mouth
yeah.
and use your ears.
Okay.
It's that simple. And look, we know that by talking, right, we start to make sense of it in our own heads, and once we say it out loud, right? The problem is when we keep it inside and keep it in our heads, we're having that conversation with our own voice in our head, and that voice in our head is the most intelligent, articulate, narcissistic person you will ever have a conversation with, and you'll very rarely win that argument with the voice in your head. So we need to open up, we need to say it out loud. So from a male perspective, we need to just learn how to listen and just give that other person the space, because I think that's a big part of it. There is, as I said, the other side of it, the more dangerous side of it, which is everything that's going on in the moment with that whole manosphere thing, where men are being told that we have to be this aggressive, male dominant person in the world, and if we're not that, then we're not a real man. That's so
Yeah.
damaging, especially
Mhm.
for younger guys coming up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
teenagers and young adults, thinking that this is how they should behave. And when that behavior is met with aggression on the other side, it's like, okay, well, I'm being told this is what I should do. Why is it not working? Why am I
Yeah.
not meeting why am I not meeting a partner? Why am I not
Yeah.
meeting somebody?
Yeah.
And again, that adds fuel then to that thought of self-worth, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing everything these influencers tell me to do. I'm being that
Yeah.
dominant person. I'm being that aggressive 1940s, 50s style man. Why does
Yeah.
nobody like me? It's because you're being that idiot, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so this all just adds fuel to the fire, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. So just be uncomfortable with the silence,
Yeah,
listen,
yeah,
and
yeah,
allow someone to vent. I mean, it's that a problem shared is a problem
yeah,
halved, but
yeah.
you sometimes, as you say, you just need to hear it out
You
loud.
just need to hear it out. And so they get
Yeah.
comfortable. What's the expression? Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because it is. But
absolutely.
yeah. And Matt, you talk a lot about building resilience. I know in your work, you work with people,
Yeah.
individuals, to help them build up that resilience. Because we all need it. Life gives you a lot of knocks and kicks, and you never know when you're going to need the store. So, what advice do you have? You talked about younger men, boys, but men in particular, kind of where can they reach out and build that resilience from? What are your tactics for that? I know that's a big question.
It's a very big question. Yeah. Look again, right? The problem I see with, or not the problem, actually, I'll rephrase that, the challenge, I should say. I see certainly with the, with the male side of the mental health conversation, is that, look, we're not used to opening up, we're not used to talking, we're not used to having that conversation, right? Um, so we need to start there somewhere. So we need to be, every bloke that's out there needs to be the one to start that conversation with somebody else. We need to stop waiting for somebody else to do it. We need to lead from the charge. The older generation need to install it in the younger guys coming up. So your senior leaders, your directors, your managers, your team leaders, any of the new guys coming in that are, just out of uni, just out of college, starting their career in the corporate world, they need to see what the example is, and that comes from the older generation that's already here in the world. And certainly we need to do that for the young guys around us, our nephews, our sons, our the young guys in our lives. We need to set that example. We need to show them that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to open up. You are going to go through trials and tribulations during your life. The worst thing you can do is bottle it up and keep it inside. And you start to build that resilience by doing exactly that, right? But then we also, and one of the things I do with my coaching clients is, we look at many different ways of how to kind of build resilience and build a tolerance, I guess, to stress that we're going to have, because we are going to have it. It's inevitable, right? So I start using different CBT techniques and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming techniques with them, to kind of identify the problem and then look at how we can sort it out very quickly, right? And 9 times out of 10, it's our own biases that come into it, and well, here's a problem, and because I'm stressed or I'm anxious or I'm really worried about it, I'm gonna go worst case scenario first, and then I'll probably stay here, and it takes me longer then to come back to a place of calm with it, really. It's different for everybody, right? So again, I'll talk about mindfulness and well-being. Your well-being might be going to the gym, right? It might be that, you love going for a run, you love going for a walk. Personally, I get tired running the bath, so going to the gym it doesn't work for me.
I feel.
Yeah. And look, I've tried it, right? I did a thing, last year, or the very beginning of last year. I worked in partnership with a local gym to me, and I was going every day, and I enjoyed it, but was it really doing anything for my well-being, my resilience? No, it wasn't. I enjoyed going to it to a degree, but I didn't feel it really helped me. So that telling somebody you have to exercise, you have to do that. Yes, exercise, it releases endorphins. There is science backing it. I'm not telling everyone not to do it, but telling somebody who's anxious or depressed or that's what you have to do is the wrong way of looking at it. You need to find things that work for you, right? Again, like I pull it back to what I said earlier, what's your shade of green, right? What works well for you, right? For me, I do, again, with my coaching clients, I do a thing called non-negotiables. So that non-negotiable has to be something that you do preferably once a day, maybe a few times a week. That's just for you. Nobody else. No one else can get in the middle of that. That's your time for you to do something without technology, without your phone, without people around you. For me, it's cooking. I'm a chef by trade. I trained as a chef years ago when I first left school. So my non-negotiable most days is I go into the kitchen, leave me alone, and I cook. And that's a way of me getting inside my head, making sense of the day, sorting out what I need to do tonight or tomorrow. And it gives me something creative then to do as well, right? For some people, it might be the gym, it might be walks, it might be reading, it might be movies, it might be whatever, right? Find something for you. But that resilience element then really comes from you taking ownership of it, recognizing that, okay, look, I'm really stressed today and I need to do something. It's catching it before it gets too late. It's understanding your change, right? What's different now? And that's a big one to look at for people as well, for anyone else looking, on the outside looking in at somebody. Is there a change in behavior? Have they shifted slightly? Right? We're creatures of habit, Claire, aren't we? So you might know with the people in your life, if they come home at the end of the day, if they've had a stressful day, they're going to walk into the house differently than what they would if they were just happy out for the day, right? Maybe the keys don't get put where they should do. Maybe the keys get put on the counter in the kitchen. It's because their mind isn't on their normal routine, right? They didn't just forget to hang them up here. Their mind wasn't thinking. So now they're on the table in the sitting room or the breakfast bar in the kitchen, right? Maybe the bag gets thrown on the floor rather than just getting put down. You're looking for a change in behavior. I did a podcast with somebody a while ago on that change in behavior. And a girl, the girl that I was interviewing was a suicide intervention trainer. And one of the big signs that this person they were speaking to noticed a change in a colleague, her fingernails, right? This woman had immaculate fingernails, always manicured, always painted, always polished, looked immaculate all the time. And a colleague noticed one day that they were chipped, they were broken, and she asked her, is everything okay? And she said, actually, no, I'm not. And it was that subtle, that tiny
Yeah.
little detail
Yeah.
that somebody noticed. So the big thing we're looking for everyone around us is a change in behavior. You
Yeah.
will act differently. And a big misconception, certainly with somebody who's considering suicide, is that they're going to look somber and depressed and they're going to walk around with the
Yeah.
weight of the world on their
Yeah.
shoulders. That's kind of true, and it's true in some cases, but it's not true in all of them.
Yeah.
Somebody who's made up their mind to die by suicide, who has a plan in place, who now knows I'm actually going to go through this, will all of a sudden be happy and
Yeah.
elated. And
Yeah.
so again, that's a change in behavior that you need to question, not go, "Oh, actually, he looks fine now today," because
Yeah.
again, we can miss that subtle sign.
Yeah.
So the resilience element of it, again, I'm circling a little bit, and I
Yeah, but
apologize,
it's
but the resilience element of it is we need to kind of catch our own changing behaviors a little bit as well. We need to start
mhm.
understanding ourselves better, right? Am I eating
Yeah.
more? Am I eating less? Am I sleeping more or sleeping less? Am
Yeah.
I a little bit more grouchy or agitated now? Are people annoying me quicker than they should be
Yeah.
annoying me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All of these little things in our own self. That's how we start to build it, and then sit back and recognize it and say,
Mm.
okay, what's stressing me out? What's worrying me?
Mm.
And how do I fix it, basically?
Yeah. No, makes sense. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, I mean, you've seen it probably, Matt, that Netflix drama called Adolescence, and
Yeah,
it's getting a lot of commentary. And, even on LinkedIn, and I know there's people on the listening to this who are parents of teenagers, boys and
hmm
girls. But how would you, I know it's a big question again, but advising parents or guardians, or, as you say, anyone who has an interest in young people in their life, who are struggling to provide, healthy masculine frameworks or role models versus the negative content you've
yeah.
mentioned that is readily available online. We know that. How do you counteract that?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, right? So again, this comes back to what I was saying earlier about that manosphere element, right?
Yeah.
In all of that stuff in the online world. Um, and you're right, myself and my wife, we watch that show, and I'd like to think that I'm kind of clued in on the online
Yeah.
world, right? I was
Yeah.
blown away by some of the stuff that I didn't know,
Yeah.
right? The language that the teenagers are using, not in a bad way, it's just the way that they speak,
No.
like the things that they mean. So the different colored emojis, the different colored hearts all have a meaning. This was brand new news to me, right? Um, but I think what is interesting and I find it even with the young lads that I work with, and even some of the older guys that I work with, when I talk about the family dynamics and all that kind of stuff, is um my wife and I have always had a thing where dinner time is family time, right? Doesn't matter what time of the day we get in at from work or from whatever, we have dinner as a family, and that's how we catch up. It's how we try and understand where everyone is. You're not
Mm.
always going to be able to read into everything, right? Let's be honest. But you can kind of get a sense of where our kids are at that point, right? With their friends, with their class, with their education, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that needs to come into it a little bit more. I think it's very easy to kind of just allow our kids to just go with it, right? You're online, you've got your friend group, you're on Instagram, Snapchat, all of these kind of places. Um, what I didn't realize, and I've done a lot of research in it since watching that adolescence thing, is that certainly the younger generation, it can take them anything from 5 to 15 minutes to be fed misogynistic or dangerous content within their echo chamber,
Mm.
right? That's startling when you think about it, that this is what's being fed into them. So I think open conversations around the table, open conversations in the house, again, leading from example. I think we need to understand what their view of the world looks like, and we can only do that by having real conversations with them to see, well, where do you place yourself in the world? What about the women in your life? What about the men in your life? What about your friend circles, all of this kind of stuff, and really get an understanding as to how they view the world.
Mm.
I think only and we can only do that by having conversations with them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not trying to be the nosy parent, but trying to show an interest. I think is
Yeah.
is the other way
Yeah.
of trying to do it as well. Look, we did it as kids. We didn't tell our parents everything, right?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
can't be naive to think that our
No.
kids tell us everything, because they
Yeah.
really don't. But I think, like from my perspective, from my family's perspective, we've always had open, honest conversations around the table. How are you feeling? How are you doing? What's this? What's that? And, we talk about things that go on in the news. We talk about things, certainly like that adolescence show has been a big topic of conversation in our house over the last week or two. And we fall down those rabbit holes of, okay, well, what is this? What's that? What's this? The incel word that they use, right? The celibate element of it, the red pill scenario where, we're thinking that women are to blame for all of my problems, and we need to get again back to this male dominant, aggressive era. We really don't. We really don't. So yeah, I think, look, open conversation, sat around the table, showing an interest and just trying to gauge understanding and try to read between the lines with the youngsters as well. I've seen a lot about this where people are saying that they should make that show mandatory in schools so that kids see. I don't really agree with that because they already know that this is going on in their, this is what they're living in their echo chambers and in their online world. I think what we need to be doing is more education around the adults element of it. I think every adult needs to watch this show. Don't think it needs to become compulsory teaching for teenagers. I think every adult needs to watch it so that your eyes are opened a little bit more to what's going on. And then you can play more of an active role in maybe limiting screen time or limiting what they have, locking down content on your home network. That kind of stuff. I think is where we need to come at it from.
We can include it in the information we send around, but I saw a really interesting study. And also just everything you said, having the open conversation, but then also not judging, not reacting, as like with the conversations you'd be having with people, trying to get them to open up. Don't jump down their throat and tell them that's wrong. You shouldn't be thinking like that. Just get them to talk, because if you can get them to talk, you can then have the conversation and it makes it better.
And that's it. And that's a great point, Claire. That's a brilliant point, because I think that's where a lot of it comes down to, certainly as a parent's perspective, right? We can see their point of view. We can disagree with it. And as a parent, we can go, you're wrong, and just shut it down.
Shut it down.
And I think that's the worst thing we can be doing now. What we have to do, exactly as you say, is, okay, so that's the way you see it. Why? Why is it you see it that way? Or why is it important to you that this happens? Or, what's your view on this? You need to have open, honest conversations, and not just shut it down. I'm right, you're wrong kind of conversation, because all you're going to do with that is again, put that wall up between you, and you're never going to see the results of it. So brilliant.
Definitely. Matt, we have had a question emailed in, and it actually ties into something I wanted to just come on to, but around kind of suicide prevention and intervention, someone has asked, what was the most important thing or best thing an employer could do to support someone around, maybe with suicidal thoughts? I think that's what that means. So they feel somebody, you ask the question, as you've said, are you thinking about suicide? And if they say yes, then what is the best thing? Because, what do they do at that point?
So I think this is, it's a bit of a loaded question, to be honest, because like on the one side, I am saying to people, look, you're not going to be the therapist, you're not going to be the person who did it, but having that conversation, there are so many nuances around that conversation. This is why I'm saying to businesses that it's so important that you do suicide awareness workshop, because the way in which you talk to somebody about that is crucial, right? There has to obviously a non-judgmental element. You have to listen, not speak, ask questions, try and understand why they think they're rated in and all of that kind of stuff. But it's a delicate conversation to have with somebody, and you need to be aware of how to have that conversation. So the problem with it in some cases is that you could think you're saying the right thing, but you could actually be confirming what that other person is thinking, but not meaning to do it. You know what I mean? And this is why I'm if you take anything from this call today, is book a suicide awareness workshop, because you'll understand what I mean by how to actually have that conversation. If it's in the interim before you do this and somebody says, yes, I am considering suicide, go for a walk, right? Take them out of the environment, take them out of the office, go for a coffee, go for a walk, find somewhere where they're comfortable with, and just ask quickly, look, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Don't try and fix it. Don't try and put anything in place. Don't try and put any of your own thoughts in, well, you should do this or you should do that. Ask them, is there is there somebody in their life that we can contact, right? I could go off on tangents here, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't, and try and keep it concise, because this is it is a bit of a loaded question, but it's a huge answer, Claire. Just try and be supportive, try and understand, what's going on, why are you feeling this way, what is it why do you think suicide is the answer? Do you know what I mean? Try and understand
get them talking.
Get them talking. Point them towards the NHS or the HSC in Ireland. But again, try and bring a friend, a family member, somebody who you can also make aware of, that can keep an eye on them, right? It may not be who you think it might be, right? So and again, try and, from a language perspective, it might be, well, Jesus, what do you think your wife will say if she found out you were considering suicide? That's the worst thing you can say, because if I'm considering suicide, right, I think I'm doing them a favor by not being here, right? So again, you're adding to their own misconceptions about why they're thinking this, or you're adding to their own bias about why I'm doing it. So the nuances in and around that conversation are delicate, right? So you need to understand how to have it. In the first instance, the best thing to do is go for a little walk. Try not to say too much. Try and get them to open up, because the less you say, the better it is for them, if you're not trying to have that conversation. Because you could inadvertently just fuel their fire, basically, by not meaning to, right? And then said, look at pointing them towards different mental health areas. So, if it's mind, if it's aware, if it's, different suicide charities, the Samaritans, that kind of stuff. And ask, look, is there somebody at home? Is there a friend, an uncle, a dad, whatever? Is there somebody that you can trust with this information that we can phone now and bring them into this conversation, get them to meet us, make them aware of it? But crucially, the answer to that question is, anyone that's watching this, contact me afterwards. I'll be more than happy to do it with you. Book a suicide intervention and suicide prevention workshop. That's the best thing you can do right now.
No, that makes sense. And Matt, I wanted to just come on. I'm aware, a lot of you taken a lot of your time this morning, but you won Person of the Year award in Bray, County Dublin, which is great, recognizing your work in the local community. But it was around, you set up, or you've worked with people to set up the community lifeline. So rapid suicide intervention when it matters. So I just thought that initiative is quite interesting and different. So could you, just to finish off, really talk us through why that's different to other suicide and prevention initiatives?
So if as far as I'm aware, it is the first of its kind. And how it differs is that it's not over the phone, right? So what we've created, certainly in my community and in Bray in County Wicklow, it's the pilot, right? So I have now a team of volunteers trained in suicide prevention and intervention. So these volunteers know how to have that conversation, how to talk somebody down, how to get them to safety, and develop a safety plan for them with a friend, a colleague, or whoever the case is, whoever that trusted adult is for that person. The difference, as I said, Claire, is that it's not over the phone, it's face to face. So my volunteers are on call. If our phone rings, or the lifeline phone rings, they quickly ascertain where this person is, where in the world they are, and then they go in pairs and they go and meet that person face to face. And it's a face to face intervention rather than it being over the phone, right? The reason I did it this way was, and it's kind of, it all stems back again to that Person of the Year award. I didn't realize you're going to mention that. So thanks for putting me on the spot with that one. Is that look, people in my community have seen the stuff that I've put online. They've heard my story because I'm quite open and vulnerable about speaking about my own attempted suicide and stuff. So a couple of people had messaged me and said, look, I'm not feeling great. Can we meet for a coffee? Can we have a chat? And it turned out that they were considering suicide, and I've managed to talk them down and get them to safety. That's where the nominations for the Person of the Year came from, was from those people who I've helped. So off the back of that, I kind of realized, okay, well, it's because I'm in the community, right? It's because I understand the nuances of my hometown. I know what it's like to go to this school, or I had friends who went to that school, so I understand it, right? I know what it's like to live in this area or that area, or again, I understand the nuances of my community. So that's where it's the first in the world. It's a community-driven response to suicide. We'll call them first responders. Because when the phone goes, you drop everything. If you're in work, or it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and you're in work and you're on call, or it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you're on call, you drop everything and you go to that person and you offer face-to-face intervention, rather than ringing phone lines, and you could end up speaking to somebody at the other end of the country who doesn't know what it's like in my area, who doesn't understand those nuances and stuff. So so that's one side of it, of Community Lifeline, right? That's the intervention piece. The preventative side of it then is, again, to try and get into as many football clubs, basketball clubs, schools, gyms, and deliver these workshops, so that everyone in my community knows how to have that conversation, that everyone is aware of how to spot the signs of suicidal ideation, that how it knows to, what are the key things I can say to then get that person to safety. So my goal with Lifeline is to, not just have volunteers trying to do this, but to have at least one person in every house in my community with that knowledge of how to spot it, because then they'll spot it with their cousins, their relatives, their sons, their daughters, and then to roll it out nationally, where we have one person in every household across the country who's able to have this awareness, rather than it being somebody who has to do a suicide prevention course because they work with vulnerable adults or they work with vulnerable kids, right? Most times when I deliver the courses, that's who I'm seeing the people are. They're coming from a job where they're social workers, or they're working with vulnerable adults, so they have to be aware of it. The HSE have done great inroads in promoting certain suicide prevention initiatives. But again, it's do it if you want to, do it if you work in this area. It's targeted at people who are in that kind of workspace, right? It's not targeted at everybody, and it should be targeted at everybody. As I said, every football club, every dart club, everyone should know this. It really, so that's the goal of what Community Lifeline will be in the future. So,
well, look, and Matt, I mean, and I know obviously you've got a whole host of other services. So what we'll do after this session is we'll put links. Anyone who's watched this can contact you directly. Obviously talk to you about all the workshops you deliver, particularly around suicide prevention and awareness. But equally, any organisations, because there's a lot of UK-based organisations who've signed up to this, who might be interested, particularly in that initiative, may reach out and talk to you as well. So look, I just want to say thank you very, very much. This recording, if not the live event, will definitely go around to the over 270 people who signed up. So that's very, very high. So thanks to everyone who did sign up, but thanks, Matt. Really, I do very, very much appreciate your time today.